Welcome to Nero Wolfe's world, where orchids bloom and secrets unfold. Tell us where you're tuning in from. Archie will keep score, Wolfe won't admit he cares. Subscribe for more classic Nero Wolfe mysteries. Every good mystery deserves good company, and a little gratitude between cases. A warm thank you to Norma, our newest patron. Your support keeps the orchids blooming and the mysteries alive. Join the circle of mystery lovers on Patreon. Link in description. Nero Wolfe and the day Archie stopped laughing. It began with a laugh that hit the air too soon, mine, and died faster than Fritz's soufflé on a cold plate. The blonde sitting across from me didn't return it. Her eyes were fixed on the office door as if she expected it to open by itself and deliver salvation in a yellow chair. She was the kind of blonde who'd been seen under spotlights and regretted most of them, the platinum shade that comes from a bottle and nerves. Her voice had that nightclub scratch, the kind that could make a toast sound like a plea. "My name is Daphne Vale," she said, "and I need to see Mr. Wolfe." I told her the obvious, that Nero Wolfe didn't like seeing anyone before his breakfast tray was cleared, and even then, only if civilization was at stake. She didn't smile. "It is," she said, "at least mine." That was enough to make me hit the office bell. Fritz appeared, immaculate as always, holding a covered tray that smelled of Fritz's scrambled eggs, soft enough to please a sultan. "Miss Vale," I said, "meet civilization's last defender." Wolfe came in at the word breakfast. He was wearing his brown house robe with the air of a man forced into public life against his will. He stopped when he saw her. "Good heavens," he muttered. "Another one before coffee?" I gave her the red chair. She perched like a wary bird. Fritz set the tray down and exited without a sound, as though women in distress were a known irritant to the house system. "Your name again?" Wolfe said, lowering himself with care. "Daphne Vale." "The singer?" She nodded, and Wolfe's lips twitched, a sign of cultural recognition if not approval. "I do not frequent cabarets," he said, "but I read the Gazette Arts pages for amusement." "Then you'll have seen the headline tomorrow," she replied. "Murder at the Blue Lantern." That got my attention. The Blue Lantern? That's the joint down on 47th. Chromium, cocktails and clientele that don't belong to the same tax bracket. She took out a cigarette but didn't light it. "My pianist, Joey Krantz, was found dead on the bandstand last night. Cyanide, they think. Someone put my lipstick on the glass beside him." Wolfe closed his eyes, as though she'd brought him a moral ulcer. "Madam, the police will manage. Inspector Kramer enjoys cases involving cosmetics. I do not." Her hand trembled as she reached into her purse. She pulled out a folded scrap of sheet music, torn, smudged and marked with strange notations in pencil. "Joey left this with me yesterday. He said, 'If anything happens, keep the song safe.'" I took it, gave it a glance and passed it to Wolfe. He studied it as if it might bloom. "You understand," he said, "that it could be a random doodle, not a Rosetta Stone." She leaned forward. "Then explain why someone followed me from the club. I saw him in the cab mirror. Same hat, same stare. He vanished when I reached your street." Wolfe raised an eyebrow in my direction. "Archie, did you notice any trailing shadows?" "I noticed a shadow," I said. "It was mine. The street's clean." Her lips trembled. "Then maybe he's smarter than I thought." That earned her a look from Wolfe sharp enough to cut the tension in half. "Miss Vale, melodrama before breakfast offends me. If you wish to retain me, present facts, not phantoms." She hesitated, then took out a checkbook. I could almost hear the ink dry when she signed. Wolfe's eyes opened a fraction wider, which for him is equivalent to a somersault. The amount had more zeros than a typist's nightmare. "Pfui," he said softly. "You have my attention." She pushed the check across the desk. "I don't care what it costs. I didn't kill Joey." Wolfe placed the check face down and leaned back. "I have not yet agreed to take your case. Money cannot abridge my repugnance for folly." "Then take it for curiosity," she said. "He died calling my name." The room went quiet. Even the ticking clock on the shelf seemed to hesitate. I stopped smiling, not because I believed her story yet, but because her voice cracked in a way that made disbelief feel like bad manners. Wolfe reached for the bell cord. "Fritz," he called, "bring Miss Vale some coffee. Perhaps caffeine will stiffen her recollection." When Fritz arrived with the tray, Wolfe waved it off to her side of the desk. "Drink and begin again. Omit the tears." She did, managing a small sip before continuing. "Joey and I worked together 3 years. He was funny, reckless. He'd been in trouble before, gambling mostly, but this time he said he'd found a way out. He wanted to show me after the show last night. I went home early. I was tired. Then I heard—" She swallowed. "I heard the police at my door." "Indeed," Wolfe said. "What did the police deduce from your lipstick?" "That I poisoned him between numbers." "And did you?" Her eyes flared. "No." Wolfe nodded mildly. A satisfactory answer in form, if not in evidence. She reached again into her purse and withdrew a compact mirror, snapping it open. "This is mine. The lipstick's shade was Crimson Nocturne. I haven't used it in months. It's discontinued. But Joey liked the colour. He said it looked like the last note of a song." I couldn't help myself. If I'd known murder came with front-row tickets, I'd have worn my tux. She shot me a look halfway between gratitude and fury. Wolfe's glance said I'd contributed enough levity for the morning. He turned back to her. "You said someone followed you. Describe him." "Tall, dark suit, small scar near his mouth." I made a note on the pad. "A scar, huh? Manhattan's full of them. We'll narrow it to 10,000. She ignored me, focusing on Wolfe. "I can't go to the police again. They think I did it. Please, help me." Wolfe sighed, the sound of civilization losing patience. "Miss Vale, deceit costs extra. I detest it almost as much as interruption. If you are withholding any fact, I will terminate the engagement and keep the check." She met his gaze squarely. "Then keep it if you must, but you'll find the truth before you cash it." That, I'll admit, had style. Wolfe noticed too. He rose, always an event, and regarded her as though deciding whether to graft her into the day's routine. "Archie," he said, "see Miss Vale home in the Heron. Ensure she is not followed. Bring me a full report and that scrap of music transcribed. I shall examine it after breakfast." "Sure," I said, reaching for my hat. "If I don't return, water the orchids." "Do not be flippant," he said. "You are my only tolerable assistant." That's Wolfe's version of be careful. I held the door for her. On the way out, she said, softly, "He really doesn't like people, does he?" "Only in moderation," I said. "Like cigars or democracy." Outside, the morning was pale and thin, the kind that makes yesterday's nightlife look like a bad dream. She slipped her arm through mine. "Strictly for camouflage," she said, and I guided her to the curb where the Heron waited, gleaming like a clean conscience. We drove in silence until she asked, "Do you believe me, Mr. Goodwin?" "I believe you're scared," I said. "And scared people sometimes tell the truth. Sometimes." She turned to the window. "He died calling my name," she whispered again. That finished any temptation I had to wisecrack. When we reached her apartment on West 54th, I made sure no tall men with scars were loitering. None were. She thanked me and disappeared behind a brass-handled door that looked more confident than she did. Back in the car, I took out the folded scrap of music and looked at it under the dashlight. Notes in uneven clusters, strange crossings between staves, like someone trying to write in code instead of melody. Red herring or road map, I didn't know, but I'd seen enough eyes like hers to know one thing. Whatever tune Joey Krantz started playing, Daphne Vale was still hearing it, and if Wolfe took the bait, so would we. When I returned to the brownstone, Wolfe was polishing off the last of Fritz's eggs, eyes half shut in postprandial peace. "Well," he said. "She's home, unshadowed, the street's clean." He nodded. "The music?" I handed it over. "Looks like a crossword puzzle went to finishing school." He glanced at it, frowned, and placed it beside the salt cellar. "Archie, we may be dealing with a fool or a genius. Both are perilous." "Which pays better?" I asked. He didn't answer. Instead, he lifted his glass of beer. Fritz must have slipped it in after noon struck, and said, "Lock the door, then come back. We begin at 1 o'clock precisely. And, Archie." "Yeah?" "Do not laugh." I grinned anyway. "I'll try to keep it to a chuckle." He closed his eyes. "Pfui." And that's how the case began, with a check that gleamed, a tune that didn't make sense, and a woman whose laugh never came back. By late morning, I hit the Blue Lantern Club. The sun had managed to bleach the last glamour off 47th Street. The neon sign still buzzed faintly like a hangover, and a bored patrolman out front eyed me as if the words private investigator translated to trouble with shoes on. I flipped my license, flashed a grin, and ducked under the awning into the kind of place that never looks right in daylight. Inside, the joint had the half-lit look of a memory that didn't want to be remembered. The bar was polished but sticky. The tables sat like tired props after the curtain dropped. A trumpet leaned on its case like it had given up performing and taken up drinking. The air was thick with what the night had left behind: gin, perfume, and a trace of cyanide, if you believed the gossip. Sid Larkin, the owner, was already sweating behind the bar. Big man, double chin, tie like a noose with tenure. He looked up when I came in. "You the reporter?" "Worse," I said. "I'm the guy who asks questions without paying for drinks. Name's Goodwin." He didn't shake my hand. "Yeah? You police?" "Independent operator. Miss Vale hired my employer." That made him blink. "Wolfe? The orchid guy?" "The same. Don't worry, he won't be dropping by. He leaves fresh air to me." He snorted, wiping a glass that didn't need it. "Then you're wasting your time." Joey Krantz croaked himself. "Heart or poison, it's all the same." "Not to the DA," I said, leaning on the bar. "Or to the lady whose lipstick turned up on his glass." He stopped wiping. "You saying Daphne?" "I'm not saying anything yet, just listening." He poured himself a shot of something brown and didn't offer me one. Joey was a good kid, wrote music like it mattered, but he got mixed up, gambling maybe, the kind of people who write their tunes with ledgers. "Meaning what?" He shrugged. "Meaning I don't talk about dead pianists unless there's a lawyer present. You can quote me on that." Before I could press further, a door near the stage swung open and out stepped Marty Vale, tucks rumpled, hair slicked, eyes bloodshot, but still carrying that band leader's arrogance like a badge. The kind of man who'd survived the Depression by making other people tap their feet. He saw me, frowned, and walked over with the stride of a man rehearsed in bad timing. "Archie Goodwin," he said. "I figured you'd show. Daphne send you?" "She asked for an update on the human race. I'm starting here." His jaw tightened. "She shouldn't have done that. It's bad for her name being tied up in this." "She's tied up because someone left her lipstick at the scene, not because of gossip." He grabbed a stool and dropped onto it, running a hand through his hair. "Listen, Joey was trouble, but he didn't deserve poison. He was working on a new number, said it'd change the tune for good. Maybe it did." "Where's the sheet?" I asked. "Cops took whatever was on the piano. Probably trash." He gave me a look that might have been grief or guilt. Hard to tell under the bar light. "He liked puzzles," Marty said. "Codes, anagrams, hiding notes in notes. You ever met a musician who thought music could solve a crime?" "Only one," I said, "and he's in the morgue." That got him quiet. The door banged open behind me, and a cloud of authority rolled in wearing a grey suit and a cigar. Inspector Kramer had the face of a man who'd been woken too early and blamed the city for it. He spotted me instantly. "Goodwin." He chewed the cigar but didn't light it. "You vultures work fast." "Morning, Inspector. Just admiring the decor. Needs a little more yellow tape, though." "This place," he grunted, sweeping the room with a glare, "is a menagerie of phonies. The only honest thing here is the cash register." I motioned toward the bar. "You mean the owner?" "Same thing." He pulled a small notebook from his pocket. "The victim, Joey Krantz, swallowed enough cyanide to kill a horse. We found it in his scotch. Lipstick on the rim matches a tube in Daphne Vale's dressing room." "Nice coincidence," I said. "You can arrest every dame with a mirror and a mouth, Inspector, but the city jail's not that big." His eyes narrowed, cigar shifting like a trigger. "Keep wisecracking and I'll book you for interference." "Sure," I said, "but then who'd bring you Wolfe's compliments?" He snorted smoke without lighting anything. "Tell Wolfe to keep his orchids out of homicide. This is police business." "Funny," I said. "He said the same about police and thinking." That got a growl, but to his credit, he didn't bite. Instead, he waved a hand. "Fine. You want to look around. Don't touch anything that bites back." That was as close as Kramer ever came to cooperation. I gave him a grin and headed for the stage. The piano sat under a dusty spotlight, lid up, keys glinting faintly like crooked teeth. The seat was still pulled out, and on it, a faint chalk outline where Joey had gone down. Somebody had set a half-empty glass on the music rack. Not evidence anymore, just atmosphere. I lifted the bench lid carefully. Inside were scattered sheets of handwritten music, smudged and scrawled. One page caught my eye, and the same odd notation I'd seen on Daphne's scrap. Circles, cross marks, uneven bars. I used a handkerchief to lift it. Underneath, where the bench bottom met the frame, was a fine trace of dark powder. I called Kramer over. "Take a look. Our late composer's work in progress." He bent, squinting. "Music?" "Unless he was designing wallpaper." He grunted. "You think that's a clue?" "I think somebody thought so." "Fine. Leave it. We'll bag it." I let him, though I noted where it had lain and the faint scent. Not of cyanide, but something metallic, sharp. My gut said ink, but darker. While the text swarmed, I found a stool near the bar and dialed the brownstone. Fritz answered, transferring me to Wolfe with a sigh that suggested the house routine had been disrupted again. "Yes?" Wolfe's voice came like slow thunder. "Report from the field," I said. "Blue Lantern, post-mortem decor in full swing. Joey Krantz got dosed in his drink. Daphne's lipstick on the glass. And I found a twin to her music scrap. Same doodles, same composer. There's also some kind of powder under the piano bench." "Describe it." "Dark grey, maybe graphite or residue." He made a small noise, approval or indigestion. "You will, of course, refrain from conjecture. Bring me a facsimile of that music at once." "Sure. Want me to hum the melody?" "Archie." His tone carried the full weight of civilization again. "This is no time for levity." "On the contrary," I said, "levity's all that's keeping the gin fumes off." He sighed. "The notation may be a cipher disguised as melody. Do not let Kramer confiscate everything before you transcribe it." "Too late. He's already got it bagged." "Phooey." "I'll see what I can do. Meanwhile, should I check with Vale?" "No," Wolfe said. "You will return here after luncheon. I shall require sustenance before thought." "Understood," I said. "Eat first, deduce later. The Wolfe diet plan." I hung up before he could growl further and found Kramer glaring from the doorway. "You calling him?" he asked. "Just letting him know you're on the job," he snorted. "Tell him I'll expect results before dinner, or he can read about them in the morning editions." "Done," I said. He jabbed the cigar toward me. "And if you find anything, bring it to me before you tell your genius boss." "Sure," I said. "But you might have to wait until he finishes his beer." That earned me a muttered curse and a cloud of unlit smoke as he walked off barking orders to Stebbins. I stuck around long enough to watch the crime scene team photograph the piano from every angle except upside down. Then, while they debated the best lens for guilt, I slipped behind the bar again. Larkin had retreated to his office, door cracked, talking on the phone. I caught a phrase, "No, the books are clean," before he saw me and slammed it shut. I made a note of that. Marty Vale was still nursing his drink, staring at nothing. I asked, "What was Joey's last set?" "Good night again," he said. "Fitting, huh?" "Maybe prophetic." He frowned. "Don't start that. Joey wasn't suicidal." "Then who was angry enough to dose his scotch?" He met my eyes but didn't answer. Red herring or guilt, hard to tell. By the time I left, the club had settled into that strange quiet after police work. Just the hum of refrigeration and the ghost of music. Outside, the street looked normal again, but the sunlight seemed too clean for what was left inside. I stopped at a payphone, jotted the melody lines I remembered, and mailed a photostat copy to Wolfe through Messenger. If it was a cipher, he'd hum it out of the paper before supper. Back in the cab uptown, I leaned back and tried to whistle the tune, but it came out wrong. Too many sharp notes, not enough heart. Somewhere in that mess of bars and numbers, someone had written a death sentence. When I reached the brownstone, it was close to 1. Fritz met me at the door with a nod toward the dining room. "Lunch is served," he said solemnly. Inside, Wolfe was already seated, napkin precise, expression composed for digestion. I dropped my hat on the rack. "Kramer sends his love." "Phooey," Wolfe said. "Sit. We shall discuss murder over lamb stew. It will not be the first time." I grinned, took my chair and raised my spoon. "Here's to the Blue Lantern. May its next tune be in a minor key." Wolfe grunted, which in his language meant agreement. By 2:42 that afternoon, the office had settled, feeling like a man who'd spent the night in a trumpet case. The office smelled civilized again, coffee, orchids from the next room, and Fritz's idea of breakfast harmony. Wolfe was in his chair, chin sunk, eyes half-lidded, giving the impression of a Roman emperor who'd been roused to hear bad news from the provinces. He didn't speak until I finished my account of the Blue Lantern, murder, lipstick, Kramer and all. Then he raised one finger, not to stop me, but to summon his beer. Fritz appeared silently, placed the chilled glass like an offering, and withdrew before the mood curdled. "Archie," Wolfe said finally, "you attempt wit before luncheon. It is barbarous." "I'm pacing myself," I told him. "The day's young, and there's still time to offend the rest of civilization." He sipped, his eyes on the ceiling. "A nightclub," he mused, "a meretricious stage for ambition and envy, draped in melody. Phooey. Music for commerce, not for art. Tell that to the guy who died for it." That got me a small glare. "Don't be glib. Murder is seldom melodious." He turned toward the scrap of sheet music on his desk, the one I'd brought from the club and its twin from Daphne Vale's purse. Both lay pinned under a magnifying glass, as though they might attempt escape. "I presume," he went on, "Inspector Kramer will blunder through half the city before realizing the answer sits within reach." "Maybe," I said. "But if you're thinking of calling him to share the glory, I should remind you the man's allergic to gratitude." "I shall not call him. He will inevitably call me." He leaned back, interlacing his fingers across his vest. "Meanwhile, we must ascertain whether these markings conceal meaning. Saul will observe Larkin and Vale. You will dictate to him my instructions." "Tail both?" "Yes. The commerce of envy, Archie, breeds more murder than love or money." That sounded like philosophy with indigestion, but I wrote it down anyway. Wolfe dictated the rest, crisp as a telegram. Hours, locations, expenses authorized. No mention of discretion because Saul didn't need reminding. When I finished, I phoned him, and he grunted his assent before hanging up to begin his patrol. At 3:27 the phone rang. I reached for it automatically, expecting Saul, and got instead the kind of sob that makes you wish telephones came with raincoats. "Mr. Goodwin, it's Daphne Vale." "Morning, Miss Vale," I said. I'd offer coffee, but the line's long distance. "Mr. Wolfe, please, I've been fired." Wolfe raised an eyebrow. I covered the receiver. "She's been canned," I said. He nodded once, slow as a clock striking doom. "Naturally." "Why naturally?" I asked. "Because guilt by publicity is the swiftest justice in this town." I put the receiver back to my ear. "Miss Vale, slow down. You were let go because of the murder?" "Yes. Sid Larkin called me this morning. He said the police questioned him again and customers were asking about me. He told me not to come back. Oh, Archie, what am I supposed to do?" Her voice trembled like a high note held too long. Wolfe was already gesturing toward the second phone on his desk. "Tell her to come here," he said. "Mr. Wolfe says—" "I heard him," she broke in. "Are you sure?" "He's never unsure," I said. "Come to the brownstone, and if you're followed again, this time try to get a better look at the chauffeur." That got me a weak laugh. She hung up, promising to come at once. Wolfe's eyes had narrowed. "You will, of course, see that she enters discreetly. Fritz will object." Fritz always objects. He considers the world outside the kitchen a hygiene risk. "Phooey." He reached for his magnifier. "You will humour him regardless." At 4:06 sharp the doorbell rang. Fritz appeared at the office doorway, lips tight. "A lady, Mr. Wolfe," he said in tones usually reserved for spoiled veal. "Show her in," Wolfe murmured. Daphne Vale entered wearing a plain grey suit that tried and failed to disguise a sleepless night. Her eyes were red but defiant, her gloves crumpled in one hand. She looked at Wolfe, then at me, and tried for composure. "I'm sorry to come unannounced." "On the contrary," Wolfe said, "you telephoned first. Sit." She did, clasping her bag like it might float her through deep water. "They think I'm poison, Mr. Wolfe. The papers will, too. I didn't kill Joey." Wolfe regarded her a moment, then gestured to me. "Archie, bring the scrap." I handed him the 2 sheets of music. He laid them on the desk before her. "Miss Vale, do you recognize these notations?" She leaned in. "Yes, Joey wrote them. He said it was his safest song. I thought he meant artistically." "Phooey. This is no song. It's a cipher, a coded message." Her eyes widened. "A code? For what?" "That, madam, is what we shall determine, if you refrain from hysteria long enough to assist." That might have sounded cruel, but she steadied under it. "I'll try." Good. Now, you received anything unusual this morning besides your dismissal? She hesitated, then opened her handbag. A telegram. No return address. She unfolded the flimsy yellow sheet. I took it from her and read aloud. You're next to play the final note. I whistled. That's subtle. Maybe they're auditioning for a new undertaker. She shot me a look that didn't appreciate humour. Wolfe reached for the telegram, eyes narrowing. May I? She nodded. He studied it, then placed it beside the sheet music. A threat couched in the language of your trade. Music as menace. Curious. I said, if someone's writing death threats in treble clef, I'll need a crash course in piano. Your ignorance of harmony is long established, Archie. Restrain commentary. Daphne looked between us like she'd wandered into a different species. Do you think whoever killed Joey means to kill me next? Perhaps, Wolfe said. Or perhaps he wishes you to think so. The distinction is vital. Her hand trembled again, and Wolfe's tone softened by a hair. You are safe here, Miss Vale. Fritz will prepare the guest room. You will remain until I decide otherwise. Fritz's audible sigh from the doorway suggested otherwise, but he vanished to obey. I said, if she's staying, I'll move my files. No sense in her tripping over the alphabet. Indeed, Wolfe murmured, already lost in his papers. Archie, take that telegram to the typewriter and prepare a copy for analysis. Include all punctuation and spacing. Every irregularity may be deliberate. I did as ordered, typing the message and handing him the copy. He compared it to the original with the patience of a jeweller examining flawed diamonds. Observe, he said finally, the spacing between final and note is greater than between any other words. Intentional, I suspect. It may correspond to a musical interval. Daphne blinked. A what? He explained. The cipher may use musical notation to encode text. Each symbol could represent a letter or number. It is not uncommon among those who wish to conceal financial or criminal records within legitimate compositions. I leaned on the desk. You're saying Joey was hiding something in his songs? Perhaps. Then maybe the murderer wanted the rest of the score. Reasonable, Wolfe admitted, but we shall not presume motive from conjecture. At that moment, the phone rang again. I answered. Saul's voice came through, quiet as a library. I've got Vale under watch. He's meeting someone at a diner on 42nd, Reuben Haldane, accountant type. Recognize the name? I did not, but Wolfe did. His eyebrows rose. Tell him, he instructed, to follow Haldane discreetly. Do not lose him. I relayed the order, hung up and turned back. So, Vale's seeing a number cruncher. Maybe Joey's code isn't love letters after all. Perhaps it is arithmetic set to music, Wolfe mused. The marriage of art and embezzlement. Daphne shook her head. Marty wouldn't steal. I said, he might if the tune was right. She started to speak, then stopped. Her eyes went distant, remembering something. Yesterday, Joey said, tell Marty the song's finished. He laughed after. I thought it was just a joke. Phooey, Wolfe said softly. A jest that kills. The silence that followed was thick enough to chew. Finally, Wolfe drew in a deep breath, signalling the end of sentiment. Archie, you will drive Miss Vale to her apartment to collect necessities. Then return here at once. I must analyze these scores uninterrupted. Sure, I said. Any chance I get to dodge cipher duty? I'm your man. Do not dawdle. I looked at Daphne. Come along, we'll make it quick. Mr. Wolfe prefers his cases unaccompanied by melodrama. She rose, smoothing her skirt, and gave Wolfe a look almost grateful. Thank you, Mr. Wolfe. He inclined his head. You may thank me later if you survive the week. That line did nothing for her complexion, but it was honest. She followed me out, and I caught Fritz in the hall muttering in German about women and carpets. When we left, Wolfe was already bent over his magnifier again. The telegram and sheet music spread before him like battle plans. He reached for his beer, then seemed to think better of it, choosing instead to ring the bell for Fritz. The investigation, like the man himself, required nourishment before revelation. As I closed the office door behind me, I heard him mutter, music, money, and murder, the same trinity as ever. I couldn't resist answering through the crack. Just keep the beat, boss. I'll bring the encore. Archie, he said without looking up, do stop talking. That was my cue to grin and exit stage left. At 11:18 the next morning, the phone rang with the kind of ring that doesn't wait for manners. I grabbed it before the second buzz. "Goodwin." Saul Panzer's voice came through, low and clipped. "Archie, you'd better tell Wolfe. Larkin's dead." That shaved a few degrees off the room's temperature. "How?" "Same trick as Joey Krantz, cyanide, and someone left another lipstick print on the glass. Same shade." "Crimson Nocturne," I said, remembering Daphne's compact. "That's it. I'll call if I pick up anything else." He hung up, the way men do when they're watching bodies get zipped into bags. I took a breath and turned to Wolfe, who was ensconced behind his desk, dictionary open beside the morning paper, coffee untouched. "Boss," I said, "the Blue Lanterns lost another man. Sid Larkin, the owner, just took his final bow." He looked up slowly, expression unreadable. "Murder?" "Same as before. Cyanide and lipstick. Saul's on the scene." Wolfe sighed. "Phooey. 2 men poisoned with feminine embellishment, a grotesque parody of gallantry." "Or a frame job with lipstick," I said. "Crimson Nocturne again." "That shade," Wolfe murmured, "was discontinued 2 years ago. Fritz's niece used it. I remember the advertisement." "You and your command of cosmetics. Want me to fetch Daphne? She's in the guest room, probably hearing about it on the radio." He shook his head. "Leave her be. Grief should not be made performative." The bell at the door rang, sharp and official. Fritz's tread came down the hall like doom on carpet. I opened the office door just in time to see Inspector Kramer storm in, hat under his arm, cigar clenched like a weapon. "Wolfe," he barked, "you're sitting on something and I want it." "Good morning, Inspector," Wolfe said without rising. "Do sit. You're winded." Kramer didn't. "Don't play cozy. Sid Larkin's dead. Same poison as Krantz. And that singer of yours, Vale, is in the middle of it again." "She is not mine," Wolfe corrected, "and your diction offends me. You imply ownership where there is none." Kramer jabbed the cigar toward him. "I imply you're withholding. My men tell me you've been analyzing some kind of coded music." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "If your men spent their time on productive labor instead of gossip, we'd all sleep better." I stepped in before the air turned to gunpowder. "Inspector, how about coffee before we discuss sedition?" He grunted. "Fine, black." I went to the kitchen, where Fritz was muttering in German about police boots and carpets, and returned with a cup and saucer. Kramer took it like medicine, pacing while he talked. "I've got 2 corpses, both poisoned, both with the same lipstick mark. Vale's prints are on 1 tube. She says she hasn't used that shade in years, but it shows up again today. What am I supposed to think?" Wolfe steepled his fingers. "You are supposed to think, period. I commend the effort." Kramer glared. "You know something, and you're not talking." "I know," Wolfe said evenly, "that you have no authority to compel my thoughts without proper retention or subpoena. Have you brought either?" Kramer slammed his hat on the desk. "You always pull that legalistic garbage. This is murder, Wolfe, and if you're hiding evidence—" "Archie," Wolfe interrupted, "did you make note of that? The inspector threatens me again with obstruction, which he has never once substantiated." I nodded. "Filed under Tuesday routine." Kramer's jaw clenched, but he exhaled through his nose and tried another tack. "Look, Wolfe, I'm not here to spar. Larkin's death happened last night, sometime after midnight. Cyanide in a whiskey glass. His wife found him. We've got the lab confirming the poison's same as Krantz's, and the lipstick, same color, same initials on the tube, DV. That, Wolfe said, is both too convenient and too foolish to be genuine." "Meaning what?" "Meaning," Wolfe said, "our murderer has a flair for theatre. The lipstick is planted. Its shade was discontinued 2 years ago. Thus, whoever uses it now intends recognition." Kramer frowned. "You sure about that?" "I am sure of everything I say, Inspector." He huffed. "So what are you implying? That Vale's being framed?" "Implying?" Wolfe's voice sharpened. "No, I am stating it outright. The poisoner desires the illusion of continuity, a pattern of guilt pointing to Miss Vale. You, driven by procedural expediency, will oblige unless dissuaded by intellect." Kramer grunted around his cigar. "You're a swell lecturer, but maybe you'd like to explain how both men knew her, and how her lipstick keeps showing up on corpses." "That," Wolfe said, "requires a fee." Kramer stared. A fee? I do not labour gratis for the city of New York, Wolfe said. If you wish my cooperation, retain me. Otherwise, kindly remove your cigar ash from my carpet. The silence was the kind that hums with the sound of men restraining themselves. Kramer finally set his cup down, hard enough to rattle the saucer. You're impossible. So I have been told. Repeatedly. I leaned forward. Inspector, look at it this way. You and Wolfe don't have to share a pillow, just a result. If he's right about the shade, your killer's playing dress-up. The real question is where he got a discontinued lipstick. Kramer eyed me. You think I didn't already send men to every cosmetics counter in Manhattan? You try finding a crimson nocturne that isn't fossilized. Maybe someone had a stash, I said. A sentimental criminal. Maybe, he admitted grudgingly. But until I get proof otherwise, Vale's still my best suspect. Wolfe snorted. Then you are not seeking proof. You are seeking permission for error. That did it. Kramer slammed his hat back on. All right, Wolfe. You sit here and philosophize. But if I find out you're holding back evidence, I'll bring a warrant and haul that desk of yours to headquarters for company. He turned toward the door, stopped and faced Wolfe again. Still, I'll say this. You've got a nose for rot. If you turn up anything, call me before another body does. That was as close to affection as the man got. He left, trailing cigar smoke and frustration. When the front door clicked shut, Wolfe reached for the bell cord. Fritz, he called, remove the coffee. Its bitterness is contagious. Fritz arrived, eyebrows furrowed. Inspector Kramer has no respect for porcelain, he muttered, whisking away the cup. When we were alone, Wolfe exhaled and closed his eyes. Archie, we are being hurried. 2 murders in succession, both theatrical. The rhythm is accelerating. Then maybe we should speed up the tempo, I said. He opened one eye. No more field work until I know what hunts you. That was new. Wolfe doesn't hand out concern like cigars. Appreciate the sentiment, I said, but someone's got to scout the stage. He shook his head. You will remain here until I determine the pattern. I won't have you poisoned for curiosity's sake. I grinned. Then I'll sit here and knit while the murderer takes a curtain call. He gave me a look sharp enough to shave with. Do not attempt humour when death intrudes. It offends both reason and taste. Then what do I do? Hum softly. You will type, he said. Prepare a memorandum of the facts, dates, times, associations between the victims, and all references to music. That's Wolfe. Turn grief into paperwork. I went to the desk and began hammering at the keys, summarizing everything from Joey's piano bench to the telegram on Daphne's dresser. Wolfe dictated corrections, occasionally pausing to sip his beer and brood. When the list was done, he took it, folded it neatly, and locked it in his drawer. 2 deaths tied to music, both men linked to Miss Vale, both marked with an obsolete shade of lipstick. The element of performance is deliberate. Whoever kills wishes to compose a narrative. Then we're working with a dramatist, I said. He nodded once. A dramatist, or a blackmailer erasing collaborators. Both professions share deceit as currency. The phone rang again. Fritz answered and reappeared at the door. Miss Vale wishes to speak with you, Mr. Wolfe. She sounds distraught. Bring her in, Wolfe said. Daphne entered like a woman walking underwater, pale, slow, unsteady. She clutched a newspaper folded against her chest. It's true then, she whispered. Sid's dead. I'm afraid so, I said gently. Poisoned like Joey. She sank into the red chair. I can't breathe. They'll think I did it again. Wolfe's tone softened fractionally. You will not be arrested unless the police have evidence. For the moment, they have only prejudice. She looked up. But I saw Sid yesterday afternoon. He said he'd found something Joey left behind. He wanted to meet me tonight to show me, but You what? I asked. She hesitated. I didn't go. I was afraid. Afraid of what? Of whoever sent the telegram. Of being alone with Sid. He was nervous. Said there were people watching him. Wolfe's eyes glinted. Did he mention names? No. Only that Joey's notes weren't just music. He said they were worth dying for. That, Wolfe said quietly, is precisely what men are doing. She shivered. I poured her a glass of water and handed it over. She took a sip, fingers shaking. Miss Vale, Wolfe said, you will remain here under my supervision. Inspector Kramer is unfit to distinguish guilt from panic. Until I've deciphered those notes, you are safest within these walls." Her lip trembled. "I don't know how to thank you." "Do not attempt gratitude," Wolfe said. "It is as exhausting as pity." She gave a faint smile despite herself. I walked her to the hallway and saw her safely to the guest room, then came back. Wolfe was staring at the ceiling again, thinking in quiet chords. He said finally, "We shall learn what melody lies within this cipher before another verse ends in death. Until then, Archie, no excursions, no gallivanting." I dropped into my chair. "All right, I'll stay leashed. But if the killer knocks, you're answering." Wolfe grunted. "Phooey." He reached for the morning paper, unfolded it, and muttered, "Music, vanity, and poison, a trinity unworthy of applause." The office settled into silence, the kind that makes clocks sound louder. Somewhere in the guest room, a woman's sob broke it. I glanced at Wolfe. "Looks like the show's out of laughs, boss." He didn't look up. "Then let us hope the final act brings sense." And with that, he rang for Fritz. Luncheon at 1, precisely on schedule, as if order could keep chaos from the door. At 12:23 a.m. the following night, the streetlight outside the Blue Lantern sliced the sidewalk into piano keys, and Saul Panzer and I were sitting on the wrong note. The club was shuttered. The neon lantern slept like a drunk with one eye open. You don't realize how much nightclubs depend on darkness until you watch one try to breathe without it. Saul had the wheel of a borrowed Buick that smelled faintly of garage and patience. He wore his flat cap low and the expression of a man who's never surprised and never late. "Your show, Archie," he murmured. "Then let's keep the curtain down," I said. "Our star tends to miss his cues." We didn't have to wait long. At 12:41, Marty Vale came along the block with his tux jacket thrown over one shoulder, tie undone. That bandleader lope slowed 2 speeds by worry. He checked the alley, then the street, then the alley again. A lock clicked at the service door. It opened a cautious inch, then all the way, spilling a wedge of stale gin into the night. A thin man in a brown suit stepped out, wire-rimmed glasses, accountant's hat, briefcase hugged like a life-preserver. "Reuben Haldane," Saul said, not quite approving. "Saw him lunching twice with Sid Larkin. No orchestra in his resume." "Unless he plays the adding machine," I said. They stood close under the awning shadow. We took the Buick a car length down and let the silence do the work. The street was a city's blink, taxi drift, shoe taps, a newsstand sighing itself to sleep. "Close enough to hear?" I asked. Saul didn't answer. His hand made a small knot. That meant go. I slid out, took the sidewalk like a roomer, and drifted into the doorway 2 storefronts from them. The brick had stored up the day's heat and the night's secrets. I leaned like I belonged and let my ears flirt. "Royalties," Marty was saying. "You promised the statements." Haldane's voice was higher than I expected, the kind that apologizes before it lies. "They're not ready. There's a discrepancy. I have to reconcile. You've been reconciling for months." Marty's breath tore the words. "Joey said the song fixed everything. Now Joey's dead." Haldane swallowed. "Keep your voice down." "You owe me numbers, not a melody. Numbers." A taxi backfired 2 blocks away. Marty flinched. Haldane almost jumped into his own briefcase. I slid closer, 1 doorway now. If the night had a conductor, he was raising the baton. Haldane hissed. "The ledgers are coded, Vale, I told you. He hid them in the arrangements. I have to transcribe. Don't say that out here." "I'm saying nothing out here. You'll get what you're due when I finish. Until then, keep her quiet. The press is sniffing." A breeze shivered the awning. Somewhere a bottle rolled and settled like a snare drum dying. I took 2 steps and put myself in their light. "Evening, gentlemen? Accounting after hours? That's devotion, or insomnia." I smiled at Marty. "You forgot to send flowers for Larkin." Marty's head snapped to me. "Goodwin, what are you doing here?" "Listening to modern music. So far I prefer ragtime." Haldane clutched his briefcase. "Who are you?" "Plain citizen," I said. "With ears. The kind that hears words like royalties and coded ledgers and gets sentimental. Joey liked puzzles, they say. Did he like blackmail too?" Marty moved like a man deciding whether to swing. "Beat it, Goodwin." "You're not my type," I told him. "But your friend here, Reuben Haldane, isn't it? He and I should talk about his taste in notation." I don't know you, Haldane said, stepping back. I have books to close. Books, I said. Sure, the kind you hide in eighth notes. His mouth worked. He took another step back, bumped the door, then bolted left, briefcase thudding. Marty swore and went the other way. I let Marty go. I'm sentimental that way. Saul, I said without turning. On him, Saul answered from nowhere, and the Buick slid off the curb as if it had practiced. I gave Haldane a sporting head start and then followed. He ran like a rabbit that had read about wolves. He cut across the street, jinked around a hydrant, and disappeared into the blue slit between two buildings where the alley pretended it wasn't a dead end. The Buick ghosted at the far corner, no squeal, just patience on four tires. Saul's shadow peeled off the driver's seat and took the alley with the speed of a rumour. When Saul runs, sound gets embarrassed and stays home. I reached the alley mouth in time to see Haldane bounce off a trash can and lose the briefcase. Papers coughed out and fluttered, white moths in a bad dream. He scooped them with a choked sound and shoved on. Saul didn't grab, didn't shout. He let the man spend his breath, then slid behind him and kept him moving. In a tale, distance is love. I stooped, palmed one straggler page the wind had delivered to the curb, and took a single glance under the streetlight. Columns of figures written in a careful hand, and along the margin, a scatter of music symbols, ties, slurs, an odd little loop over a bar line. In the top corner, a neat stamp, R.H. I had no wish to start a new career as evidence custodian, so I put the page back on the stack and kicked it once so it rejoined its brothers. The city can't say I never give. Haldane burst out the alley's far end, cut right, and vanished around the block. Saul went with him, leaning, not chasing, every inch of him made from practice. The Buick coasted to meet them on the next avenue. They folded into the dark together, like notes merging into a chord you almost recognize. I let the quiet come back, then went to the service door. Locked again, this time tight. The blue lantern hunched behind it like a sulking animal. I gave the door a friendly pat and headed for a payphone. At 1:07 a.m. the same night, the brownstone phone took my call. Fritz answered with an I am not awake hello and handed the line to Wolfe, who was never asleep enough to miss being annoyed. Yes, he said. Your consulting pianist reports from 47th. Vale met Haldane. They murmured about royalties and coded ledgers. Haldane ran. Saul tailing. I did not steal the man's homework. Commendable, Wolfe said. Return at once. Bring your wits. Leave your swagger. I'm at the desk. You're working after midnight? Who signed the waiver? Return, Archie. When Nero Wolfe abandons the clock, something has gone off the staff. I beat the taxi back to West 35th by a minute because the driver was in love with a red light. Inside, the office was lit the way Wolfe likes his ideas, clean and unsentimental. He had the 2 scraps of music on the blotter and a row of index cards fanned like a hand of bad poker. He wore his brown robe, and his beer had a ring of condensation as neat as a theorem. You look chipper, I said. Either you cracked it, or Fritz oversalted your eggs yesterday, and you're planning revenge. He twitched a finger at the chair. Sit, observe. He pointed to the music. Our composer's oddities are not ornaments. They are instructions. Here, these ties and slurs are not performance marks. They indicate groupings. The circled notes correspond to letters by position. The bars are separators. It is not elegant, but it is effective. He slid me an index card with columns. A simple substitution using scale degrees and bar counts. The key signatures changed to mask frequency. That's beautiful, I said, because it was. Beauty, he said, is accidental. Utility is intended. He tapped another card. This line yields dates and sums. The sums are large enough to be interesting to the Internal Revenue men, and larger still to the moralists. Here, this cluster produces a name. He turned the card so I could read his square, stubborn script. Haldane. I nodded. He signs his homework too. I heard it from his briefcase when it hit the pavement. Wolfe's mouth curved. Then we may assert Haldane is not simply an accountant. He is a custodian of illicit receipts disguised as music. Royalties indeed. If I were vulgar, I would call it laundering. If they're laundering cash through chord progressions, I said, I'll buy sheet music instead of stock. Your portfolio would remain equally uninspired, he said dryly, and as susceptible to fraud. I leaned forward. So Joey's score is a ledger. He coded payments, Haldane's involved, Vale's tied by proximity, Larkin's dead, which removes a man who might have kept the books. That leaves ambiguity, Wolfe finished, which I detest. We must learn who compels whom. Did Krantz extort Vale? Did Larkin skim and Haldane protect him? Or did another, perhaps our murderer, use the code to prune the tree? He closed his eyes as if that helped him smell logic. Music as currency. Yes. The phone rang once, sharp, as if it had rehearsed. I took it. Saul's voice, soft and winded, came over the wire. He tried the station, then a cab. Switched at 42nd. I stayed on him. He's in a walk-up on East 51st, third floor rear. Light on. I'll hold the perch. Good, I said. Don't sing outside his window. Not my register, Saul said, and clicked off. I reported. Wolfe nodded, filing the address in that high cabinet he calls a mind. He will not run tonight, Wolfe said. Rats seldom abandon a ship they believe they scuttled themselves. I stood and stretched. My shoulders felt like they'd been practicing scales. I'll type a memo for the file. Do, Wolfe said. Include the time, the phrases you overheard, and the physical description of Haldane. Take care with his hands. Accountant's hands betray them. Thin, nervous, pen dents on the middle finger, ink ghost near the cuticle. He holds the briefcase like he expects it to bite. Acceptable, he said. Add it. I typed, the keys snapping like a small, eager dog. While I worked, I thought of Daphne Vale asleep in our guest room or not asleep, seeing Joey's mouth form her name forever. Every case collects a face. Hers had picked mine and wouldn't let go. I'm not a sentimentalist by profession, but I'm not made of radiator iron either. I finished the memo, signed it for the file, and laid a carbon on Wolfe's desk. He read it once, nodded, and slid it under a paperweight shaped like a bronze beetle. He doesn't like beetles. That tells you what he thinks of paperwork. Archie, he said, without looking up, you will not visit that walk-up. Saul is sufficient. I wasn't packing my toothbrush. You were packing your impulses. Do not. He glanced at the clock. We will resume in the morning after the plant rooms. If Haldane still breathes, he may be induced to intelligible speech. And if he doesn't? Then our work narrows, he said, and his tone made the room cooler. I stood, yawning on principle. Wake me if inspiration knocks. If inspiration knocks, Wolfe said, it will be at a civilized hour. He reached for the bell cord but didn't pull it. There would be no tray at this hour, and Fritz would have killed us both. Wolfe settled instead for his beer, lifted it, and held it like a toast to the inevitable. I headed for the door. Boss, I said, and he glanced up. If the music's money, all the applause in the world won't drown it. We're in for a loud finale. He made a small sound. Then conserve your voice. The phone rang again, one crisp note. Saul or trouble or both. I put my hand on the receiver and looked at Wolfe. He nodded once. I lifted the phone. Goodwin. A breath on the line and a voice I didn't know said soft and flat, tell the fat man the encore's for her. The click was quiet, like a key turning in the wrong door. I set the receiver down very gently. Wolfe's eyes had sharpened to points. For whom? He asked. For Daphne, I said. Phooey, he breathed, and finally pulled the bell cord hard enough to wake the house. At 10:55 a.m., I headed to the Midtown Diner. I was halfway through my second cup of coffee when the brownstone doorbell began behaving like a fire alarm. Fritz answered it, came back with the Gazette, and handed it to me the way you'd hand someone a subpoena. The headline stretched across the front page like a slap. Torch singer sheltered by Wolfe. Beneath it, a grainy photo of Daphne Vale leaving the Blue Lantern, looking like a lost aria wrapped in mink. Congratulations, I told Wolfe. You've made the society pages, the hard way. He was in his chair, robe neat, eyes half closed, letting the words torch singer hang in the air like smoke he didn't intend to breathe. Who is responsible? He asked quietly. According to the byline, an enterprising columnist named Dugan. According to Lon Cohen, who's probably pacing outside the newsroom with ulcers, the leak came from the police. I dialed Lon. He picked up on the first ring, voice tired and nicotine thick. Archie, for what it's worth, I tried to kill the story, but it came down from the city desk. Someone high up in homicide fed them the bones and Dugan gnawed them clean. Police leaks, huh? That's civic hygiene for you. Don't quote me, Lon said, and tell Wolfe I'm sorry, but once they had the photo, it was open season. I hung up. Wolfe hadn't moved, but the silence in the room had grown a spine. He spoke at last, each word trimmed and chilled. Public notoriety is an affliction I decline to suffer. Henceforth this house is closed. No callers, no interviews. Fritz will answer neither door nor telephone for strangers. Until the truth is clear, I shall not feed the wolves. Except the one you live with, I said. Pfui. He turned a page of the Gazette with distaste. This mongrel prose offends me. Torch singer, indeed. They make her sound like a banshee in sequins. I said, if she starts humming, we'll charge admission. The phone rang again at 9:43. Short, hard, official. Kramer's growl came through the wire like a bad trumpet solo. Wolfe, you see the paper? I cannot avoid it, Wolfe replied. You'd better keep your house in order before I have to do it for you. This thing's blowing up. I've got reporters calling my office, the DA calling me, and your name sitting in the middle of it like a rhinoceros at a tea party. Then remove the rhinoceros, Wolfe said. You think I wouldn't? The only reason you're not explaining this downtown is because the commissioner likes his orchids. Your candour is tedious, Wolfe said. If you wish to relieve yourself, Inspector, use the proper facilities, not my telephone. There was a long exhale that might have been smoke or surrender. Just keep her out of sight, Kramer said finally. And for God's sake, Wolfe, don't make me serve a warrant. He hung up. Wolfe replaced the receiver with delicate precision. The man's diction degenerates yearly, he muttered. Archie, bring Miss Vale here at once. I found her in the guest room, sitting at the dressing table with the Gazette folded neatly beside her, unread but radiating. Her face looked carved from porcelain that had already cracked once. I didn't ask for protection, she said as soon as she saw me. No, I said, but you needed it. Now you're getting press coverage as a bonus. She smiled without humour. Publicity I can't sing through. Wolfe wants you in the office. When she entered, he rose, which told me how serious he was. Miss Vale, he said, I require the truth entire, not its melody. You told us you left the Blue Lantern before Mr. Krantz's final set, yet the last song he played was titled Final Note. That phrase appears verbatim in your telegram of warning. Her hand went to her throat. I didn't know the title. Spare me the reflex, Wolfe said sharply. You received that telegram at 8 the following morning. The song was performed near midnight. Either coincidence has grown clairvoyant, or you prevaricate. She looked at him, then at me, as if weighing which one would break first. Finally she exhaled. Joey told me the week before. He said he was writing a piece called The Final Note. Said it was our story. I thought he meant the end of us. Wolfe's voice softened slightly. Yet the telegram used it as threat. Yes, she whispered, because it was. Joey found out about Marty, about the money. I leaned forward. Money? My ex-husband, she said. Marty Vale, the band leader. He was in trouble, gambling, bad debts. Joey helped him cook the royalties using Haldane's ledgers. It started as a favour, then turned into blackmail. Joey told Marty he'd expose him unless Marty paid up. But then Joey changed his mind. He said he'd make it right through the music. A code, he called it. I didn't understand. I just wanted it gone. Wolfe steepled his fingers. You feared exposure. I feared losing what little I had left, she said quietly. My name, my voice, my work. And now, she gestured to the Gazette. Now that's gone too. The silence that followed wasn't comfortable. Fritz might have entered then with a tray if he hadn't been under orders to ignore the world. I broke it first. You crooned for applause, not confessions, sweetheart. Joey just didn't know which song he was in. She flinched, then smiled faintly. You make it sound like a tragedy worth tickets. Everything in this town sells if you find the right orchestra, I said. Wolfe cleared his throat. Archie, enough of your musical metaphors. Miss Vale, you have provided illumination, though dim. Your honesty, belated as it is, may yet preserve you from incarceration. For now, you will remain here. The city's appetite for spectacle is voracious. I refuse to supply the next course. She rose, uncertain. You believe me? I believe, Wolfe said, that deceit rarely survives daylight, and it is nearly noon. She left the room quietly, closing the door with the care of a woman afraid of sound. Wolfe sat back, exhaled through his nose, and reached for the bell cord. "Fritz," he called, "bring lunch at 1 precisely. Until then, no calls, no visitors." I folded the Gazette and tossed it into the wastebasket. So the lady lied to save face, not exactly rare on this island. "She lied," Wolfe said, "to protect a man who deceived her and betrayed his partner. That, too, is not rare. What interests me is the telegram. The phrasing was Joey's, but the hand was not." He closed his eyes, the way he does when thought becomes architecture. Someone else wrote that threat. Someone who knew Joey's music intimately and knew Miss Vale's fear by heart. "Sounds like a duet," I said. "Archie," he murmured, "if you ever tire of flippancy, you might make a passable detective." "Too late," I said. "I already work for one." He grunted, which for Wolfe passes as affection, and reached for his beer. Outside, a delivery truck rattled by, its radio spilling swing music into the noon air. Inside the brownstone, the only rhythm left was the tick of the office clock and the faint rustle of a newspaper headline dying in the wastebasket. By the time I reached the Midtown diner, the morning rush had drained out, leaving coffee cups and regrets cooling on the counter. The place was one of those chrome-sided numbers that looked like it had rolled off an assembly line and forgotten where home was. The waitress had a pencil behind her ear and the patience of a saint with no congregation left. Reuben Haldane was supposed to meet me there at 11 sharp. He'd sounded nervous over the phone, the kind of man whose conscience had started keeping its own hours. I got there 5 minutes early, slid into a booth facing the door and ordered coffee. The air smelled like burnt toast and last chances. At 11:10 he appeared, briefcase in hand, same brown suit that had seen better clerks. His eyes darted as if every sugar bowl hid a subpoena. He slid into the seat opposite me and tried for a smile that didn't make the trip. "Mr. Goodwin," he said, I shouldn't have come." "That makes 2 of us," I said. "But since you did, let's hear it. The ledgers, the music, the whole arrangement." He opened his mouth. What came out wasn't words, just a short gasp and a rattle as his hand clenched the coffee cup. The cup tilted, then dropped, scattering black liquid across the table. His eyes bulged, and before I could reach him, he folded sideways like a closing file folder. The waitress shrieked. Someone called for a doctor who wouldn't get there in time. I leaned over, checked his pulse. Nothing but the faint echo of cyanide in the air. I knew that smell now. Sharp, bitter, unforgettable. Saul Panzer materialized at my shoulder, moving as quiet as guilt. "I tailed him from the 51st Street walk-up," he said. "He didn't meet anyone. Must have been in the cup." "Same trick," I muttered. "Joey, Larkin, now Haldane. Someone's cleaning house before the creditors call." Saul's gaze went to the table. A matchbook lay there, half soaked in spilled coffee, stamped with the Blue Lantern's Art Deco logo. Inside, 2 initials written in pencil, MV. "Well," I said, "that makes for a short list." "Or a planted souvenir," Saul said grimly. He melted away before the uniforms arrived, as was his habit when a scene got crowded with law. I stayed long enough to answer questions, keep my expression somewhere between helpful and harmless, and let the coroner do his slow dance with the body. Then I phoned Wolfe. "Dead?" he asked, his voice flat. "As the fish course at Fritz's Monday lunch. Cyanide, again, and a matchbook with Marty Vale's initials. There was a pause long enough to feel deliberate. Return, at once." When Wolfe uses "at once," it's not an invitation. I settled the check for my untouched coffee and left the place humming with gossip. Back at the brownstone, the air was as heavy as a courtroom. Wolfe sat with his eyes closed, fingers steepled, a row of index cards before him like jurors he didn't respect. "Motive," he said, without opening his eyes. Vale embezzled from his band's publishing accounts. Krantz discovered it, used the coded ledgers as leverage. Larkin learned enough to be dangerous and was silenced. Haldane managed the figures, a necessary accomplice until now. "And Daphne?" I asked. "Collateral, a pawn sacrificed for illusion. She knew, but not enough to survive knowing." I handed him the matchbook in a tissue. He studied it, lips tightening. "Symbolism. The killer plays to silence the audience." I said, "Then he's due an encore." He gave me a sharp glance, the kind that could trim hedges. "Archie, your levity is tasteless." "Maybe, but it beats poison for breakfast." He leaned back, exhaled through his nose. "The music is finished, yet the conductor persists. This murderer arranges his composition carefully, each death a rest in the score. We must anticipate the finale. That sounds like my cue to hit the pavement. No. His tone cut the air clean. You will not. I blinked. No field work? Since when do you bench your star player? Since your conduct has become reckless exhibitionism, he said sharply. You have already been too near death more than once this week. I will not indulge further. Indulge? You make it sound like a dessert course. Archie. He opened his eyes then, and the look wasn't theatrical. It was real. Enough. That single word carried more weight than a sermon. I shut my mouth, which I can do when required by friendship or survival. Wolfe rose, a rare movement that always looked like gravity had decided to negotiate. He went to the window, gazing out at nothing in particular. 3 men dead, 1 woman hounded, and a fool in print declaring me her protector. The city prattles while the killer tunes his final chord. You will stay here. Fine, I said lightly. But when the curtain falls, don't expect applause if I'm still in my seat. He turned back, expression unreadable. Archie, I have no intention of losing you to another man's composition. That one hit deeper than he probably intended. I shrugged it off with a grin. Then I'll sit tight and mind the home band. Just don't start humming. He sank into his chair again, signalling the end of argument. Pfui, go type a memorandum for Saul and remind Fritz that lunch is late. The brownstone settled into its usual rhythm. Paper rustle, clock tick, the faint sound of Fritz clattering defiance in the kitchen. Outside, Manhattan played its eternal tune, half jazz, half siren. Inside, we waited for the next note, the one we both knew was coming, and prayed wouldn't be the last. At 4:30 that afternoon, the brownstone had the hush of a cathedral that had just heard confession. Wolfe sat at his desk, sleeves immaculate, eyes half closed, with the air of a man about to announce that the world had, at last, caught up to his intellect. I'd seen that look before. It meant the numbers had sung. The last page of music lay before him, full of loops and slashes that might have passed for melody if you didn't know better. He lifted one sheet with his thumb and forefinger, holding it like a reluctant insect specimen. At last, he said, the cipher is complete. I'll alert the press, I said. They'll want to know you cracked a murder case before dessert. He ignored that. Observe, Archie. Each bar line corresponds to a date. The notes indicate sums. The rests divide payees. This, he tapped the score, is not music at all, but accounting disguised as art. I leaned closer. Then Joey Krantz and Haldane weren't composing. They were cooking the books. Precisely. Their partnership was more commercial than melodic. They concealed the financial intestines of Mr. Vale's enterprise. Illegal payments, bribes, royalties to fictitious names. A symphony of fraud. And Joey wanted to play solo, I said. Until Vale silenced him, Wolfe murmured. Haldane too, when his conscience grew louder than prudence. Both men killed to preserve a ledger written in treble clef. He pushed the papers toward me, satisfaction cutting through the fatigue in his voice. You see, Archie, art can hide sin as easily as reveal beauty. Sure, I said. And if they'd used maracas instead of music sheets, we'd still be in the dark. He glared mildly, which in Wolfe terms is affection. Then he tugged the bell cord. Fritz, Inspector Kramer will be joining us shortly. Beer and coffee. Yes, sir, came the reply from the hallway, the tone suggesting Fritz didn't approve of either guest or timing. At 4:47 sharp, the bell rang. Fritz ushered Kramer in like a man admitting winter. The inspector's coat looked 2 hours behind on pressing, and his cigar was down to the nub. You said this was private, Kramer growled, dropping into the red chair. If this turns out to be another of your lectures, Wolfe. It is, Wolfe said, but one with dividends. Kramer grunted, eyeing the papers on the desk. Those the music sheets? They were, Wolfe said. Now they are the murder weapon's motive. I've translated them. You mean decoded? Translated, Wolfe corrected. A language is a language, Inspector, whether it's Greek, German, or deceit. These compositions record financial transactions between Mr. Vale's company and criminal beneficiaries. Mr. Krantz and Mr. Haldane created the cipher together. When Mr. Krantz threatened exposure, Mr. Vale killed him, appropriated the code, and later killed Haldane when he realized the police were closing in. Kramer's cigar froze halfway to his mouth. And the lipstick? The singer's initials. Staged, Wolfe said flatly. Planted to direct suspicion toward Miss Vale, whose notoriety offered him camouflage. You were expected to see the surface, a jealous woman, a sentimental prop. Instead of the real composition, greed. Kramer exhaled smoke that carried the day's exhaustion. That's a neat story. Can you prove it? Wolfe gestured to me. I handed Kramer a photostat I'd typed an hour earlier, detailing the pattern Wolfe had uncovered. Names matched to notes, dollar amounts to scales. It read like a confession set to jazz. He flipped through it, brow furrowing. You're telling me these payments match what we found in Vale's safe last week? They coincide exactly, Wolfe said. I had Saul confirm the amounts with the accountant at Vale's distribution firm. The dates and figures align. There's no artistry in embezzlement, Inspector, merely rhythm. Kramer rubbed his temple. So Vale kills Krantz to keep him quiet, then Haldane to close the account. And the singer? An unfortunate bystander, Wolfe said. He used her lipstick as emblem, an echo of the public's fascination. He understood that notoriety blinds faster than cyanide. Kramer's jaw worked around his cigar. You're asking me to clear her name in print. I am requiring it, Wolfe said, voice ironed smooth. Miss Vale has been maligned by gossip, and I detest inaccuracy almost as much as homicide. The inspector looked at him, then at me, and something like reluctant respect flickered behind the smoke. You're making this official? I'm placing the full record at your disposal, Wolfe said. On one condition, the Gazette prints a retraction, publicly, with your signature of corroboration. Kramer blew out a long stream of smoke. You don't make it easy. Truth seldom does. For a while, only the tick of the office clock spoke. Then Kramer stood, tucking the photostat under his arm. All right, Wolfe. You get your headline, quietly. I'll call the DA, set up the paperwork. We're moving to pick Vale up before dark. Good, Wolfe said. Discretion is imperative. The woman has suffered needlessly. Kramer nodded, weary but genuine. You've done it again, damn you. Language, Wolfe murmured. He grunted. You're a strange pair. Him with the beer, you with the typewriter. Someday I'll figure out why it works. That'll be the day, I said. He managed a half smile. Yeah, maybe. When the door closed behind him, the office seemed to exhale relief. Wolfe leaned back, eyes half-lidded. The maestro ran out of notes, I said. He composed his requiem, Wolfe replied softly. I let that sit. Outside, the late sunlight was slanting gold through the Venetian blinds, laying bars across Wolfe's desk like sheet music for silence. He reached for his beer, sipped and frowned. Flat. That's what triumph tastes like, I said. Phooey. Fritz entered then, carrying a folded note. Messenger just left this, sir. Wolfe took it, broke the seal, and read. The change in his expression was small, but enough to nudge my pulse north. He handed it to me without comment. It was typed. No signature, no flourish, just 7 words on hotel stationery. Tell your genius she's gone. The stage is empty. I looked up. Vale? Wolfe's tone dropped to granite. Yes. She slipped out. Kramer's men have her under protective watch. The air in the brownstone felt suddenly thinner, like a string pulled too tight. Wolfe set his beer aside, untouched now, and murmured, Archie, prepare the car for Saul. We must recover the coda before the piece ends in silence. He leaned back, eyes narrowing, the faintest glint of fury breaking through the calm. No man escapes after ruining my composition. And for once I didn't have a wisecrack. The case wasn't over, not by a long note. By the time I reached the Blue Lantern that night, Manhattan had already buttoned its collar and turned down its lights. The club sat on 47th like an old actor, waiting for an encore that would never come. The marquee unlit, the door half open, the air thick with yesterday's applause. The last time I'd been there, the joint had hummed with trumpets and perfume. Now it smelled of gin and ghosts. Inside, the stage lights still worked, one of them anyway, throwing a pale, nervous beam over the piano. The keys gleamed like teeth in a mouth that had stopped singing. I could hear the soft tick of the ceiling fan, turning air that didn't want to move. And then he spoke. You're late, Goodwin. Marty Vale stepped from the shadows near the bar. His tux jacket was wrinkled, collar unfastened, face hollowed by sleepless nights. The pistol in his hand looked clean, too clean, a professional farewell gift. In his other hand, a drink caught the light like liquid regret. "Traffic," I said. "You'd be surprised how long it takes to find a man who's run out of songs." He smiled, a thin, crooked thing. "Then you found me just in time for the last verse." "I don't buy tickets for funerals," I said, "especially not when the guest of honor's still upright." He took a slow sip. "You should have stayed out of this, Goodwin. It's not your melody." "Maybe not," I said, "but it's my client's reputation and Wolfe's digestion. You tangled both." He laughed softly. "You think I care about reputation? I had one once. You heard Daphne sing. You know what it's like to be applauded one night and forgotten the next." "Sure," I said, "but not everyone kills their audience to keep the applause going." He stiffened. The gun came up an inch, almost unconsciously. "You don't understand. Joey was bleeding me dry. He and that numbers rat, Haldane, they had me cornered. The ledgers were theirs. I just signed the checks. But Joey, he wanted more. Always more. He said he'd tell Daphne." "About the embezzlement," I said. He nodded. "She thought she loved a musician. She didn't know she was married to a thief. Joey would have told her, and she'd have left. So I gave him one last drink." "With cyanide," I said. He looked at the gun like it was part of the story. And when Haldane started twitching, I knew he'd figured it out too. The fool kept a copy of the music, said it was his insurance, so I had to take that too. After that, well, I suppose I thought I was free. "Until Wolfe played your song backwards." He smiled faintly. "That man should have been a composer. Every note exactly where it belongs." "Don't flatter him," I said. "He already owns a mirror." That drew a short, broken laugh, then the sound of glass hitting the floor. He'd dropped the drink. "She tried to stop me, you know," he said. "Daphne. Came here the night Joey died. Said she'd go to the police if I didn't tell the truth. I locked her out. She kept pounding on the door until the music stopped. The silence after that was thick enough to trip over. "She still loves you, Marty," I said quietly. "She's been hiding in Wolfe's house, praying you'd come to your senses." He shook his head slowly. "It's too late for that. There's only one way this song ends." "Sure," I said, edging closer. "But maybe you should let the orchestra play it. The state's got plenty of conductors who handle finales." The gun swung toward me now, though his hand trembled. "Don't, Goodwin." "I wasn't planning on a duet," I said, and took another slow step. "You're a lousy aim anyway. You shoot that thing, you'll miss me, and hit the piano. And believe me, the piano's had enough abuse for one case." His eyes flicked to the stage, just for a second, the move of a man reliving a memory. I took that second. My hand went for the gun, fast, but he jerked back, catching my wrist. The weapon clattered across the floor, spinning once before stopping under the piano bench. We both froze, listening to the echo die. Somewhere outside, a siren began its long Manhattan wail. "That's Kramer," I said. "He's got good timing for a man who hates music." Marty exhaled. "Tell him to wait. I'll be finished by then." I was about to argue when the front door banged open hard enough to shake the dust from the chandelier. Kramer came in with his gun drawn and Stebbins behind him, eyes scanning like a searchlight. "Vale," Kramer barked. "Drop it!" Marty looked at the weapon under the bench, then at me. For a second I thought he'd go for it anyway. Then he moved, slow, deliberate, crouching, lifting the pistol by the barrel. "Don't," I said. He smiled, that same tired smile that had started this whole mess, and fired once. The sound was enormous in the empty room, echoing through the rafters. The bullet hit the piano dead center, snapping a string that whined like a dying note. When the smoke cleared, he was still standing. The gun hung loose at his side. "That was for the music," he said softly. "The only thing that didn't lie." Kramer moved in, gun still steady but eyes less hard. "You're under arrest for the murders of Joseph Krantz and Reuben Haldane." Marty nodded once, like a man agreeing to his own obituary. "Fair enough." He turned to me. "Tell Daphne I tried to finish the song." "Yeah," I said. "You finished it all right." Kramer took the gun from him carefully, almost respectfully, then motioned to Stebbins to take him. But Marty didn't fight. He just walked, hands behind him, shoulders straight. "Archie," Kramer said, "you escort him. I think maybe you earned that one." I nodded. "Thanks, Inspector." He gave me a look, not warm but not cold either. "Tell Wolfe I'll send the paperwork in the morning, And for God's sake, keep his name out of the papers this time. I watched them go. The piano string was still vibrating faintly, a single high whine that faded like breath. I went to it, touched the key. The sound died altogether. For once, I said softly, the music really stopped. When I got back to the brownstone, Wolfe was at his desk, reading the evening edition as though the city's sins were none of his concern. Fritz had brought in the beer, 2 glasses chilled to perfection. "Well?" Wolfe asked. "He played his finale," I said. "Shot the piano instead of himself. Kramer's got him." Wolfe grunted. Not satisfaction, not surprise, just acknowledgement. Fitting. The man's vanity was incurable. Even his remorse was theatrical. "He didn't have much choice," I said. "When the curtain's falling, you grab the spotlight or you go dark." "That," Wolfe murmured, "is precisely why I prefer orchids to people. They bloom in silence and die with dignity." I sat, reached for the beer. "You'd have liked the ending. He left a better note than most men." Wolfe's gaze lifted briefly from the paper. "A gunshot is not a note, Archie." "Depends who's listening." He let that hang, then folded the newspaper neatly and set it aside. "Miss Vale will be informed. Kramer promised to handle it quietly. She'll read about it eventually, but not tonight." "Good," Wolfe said, closing his eyes. "Let the woman keep her illusions for one more evening. The world will erode them soon enough." For a minute, the only sound was the soft clink of glass as he poured. The beer caught the lamplight, gold and cold, civilized as a sermon. "You know, boss," I said, "you never told me why you took this case. It wasn't the fee. Daphne's check barely covered Fritz's butter bill." He gave a faint smile. "Sentiment, perhaps. The grotesque sight of art employed for swindle offends me. Music, like reason, should elevate, not conceal. I wish to see it redeemed." I raised my glass. "Well, consider it redeemed. The murderers in custody, the innocent cleared, and the piano retired with honours." Wolfe inclined his head gravely. "Then let us permit the curtain to fall." He lifted his beer and we drank. The clock ticked once, solemn as applause from an empty house. Outside, the city's hum carried on, indifferent as ever. And somewhere between the ticking clock and Wolfe's quiet satisfaction, I thought I heard it, the faint echo of a final chord, hanging in the air, refusing to die. By 7:30 that evening, the brownstone felt like a courtroom that had decided to trade oak benches for leather chairs. Fritz had cleared dinner early, veal cutlets that even my nerves couldn't ruin, and Wolfe had ordered the office prepared for the nouement, which in his language meant no interruptions, no ringing phone, and no sympathy for my sore feet. When the doorbell finally sounded at precisely 8 o'clock, I opened it to find Inspector Kramer, looking as though the cigar clamped between his teeth had committed a personal betrayal by refusing to light. Behind him came Daphne Vale, pale under her veil and clutching her handbag like it held the last of her courage. The third arrival was a tall, angular man in a striped suit, Miss Daphne Vale's lawyer, Milton Rusk, of the firm that billed by the minute and breathed through case law. They followed me into the office, where Wolfe was already enthroned behind his desk, a half-inch of golden beer gleaming in the glass beside him. The room smelled faintly of orchids and brewing tension. "Good evening, Inspector," Wolfe said, his tone that of a monarch addressing a worthy but occasionally troublesome knight. "Miss Vale, Mr. Rusk, please be seated. This matter will not detain you long." Kramer took his usual chair, the one with the worn armrest from years of municipal friction. Daphne sat near the corner of the desk, her gloved hands folded. Rusk arranged himself with legal precision, crossing his legs like an affidavit. I stayed standing, habit, and the best way to dodge rhetorical shrapnel. Wolfe waited until the silence was thick enough to butter, then began. "This affair," he said, "has been an unmelodious composition, marked by dissonance and fraud. But like any competent conductor, I prefer to bring it to a proper coda." Kramer snorted around his cigar. "If this is another lecture, make it short. The DA's chewing glass waiting for my report." Wolfe inclined his head. "You will have it, and it will be digestible." He gestured toward the stack of photostats on his desk. "These, Inspector, are transcriptions of the coded music sheets recovered from Mr. Krantz's effects and from the piano bench at the Blue Lantern. They form, as you now know, a ledger of illicit transactions." Rusk raised a finger. "Alleged transactions, Mr. Wolfe." "Phooey. alleged only to those who find profit in pretense. Kramer's lips twitched. Go on. The structure, Wolfe continued, tapping one page with the care of a maestro touching a fragile score, is elegantly simple. Each note corresponds to a numeral, the placement indicating a date. Combined, they reveal payments, illegal payments, to dummy companies tied to Vale's recording business. The true ingenuity lies in the disguise, a ledger masquerading as jazz. Daphne flinched at the name Vale, but Wolfe went on as if reciting scripture. Mr. Krantz, the pianist, and Mr. Reuben Haldane, the accountant, collaborated in the scheme. They funneled money from publishing royalties into the mob's accounts, money owed to legitimate performers. When Mr. Krantz grew dissatisfied with his portion, he threatened exposure. Mr. Vale, Wolfe's gaze shifted to Rusk, silenced him. Cyanide in a glass, efficient but conspicuous. Rusk's mouth tightened. You have no proof my client administered. Circumstantial, yes, Wolfe interrupted, but sufficient for reason. Mr. Haldane was next. He too had a ledger. He too drank his final coffee laced with cyanide, a pattern most unbecoming. Kramer leaned forward. You're saying Vale killed them both for blackmailing him? I am saying, Wolfe replied, that Vale murdered for convenience. His empire of notes and numbers was collapsing. He framed Miss Vale to divert suspicion, employing her lipstick as emblematic bait, shade Crimson Nocturne, discontinued for 2 years. A cunning gesture, but one born of a guilty imagination. Daphne's voice cracked the stillness. He used my name? Yes, Wolfe said quietly, and your art, Miss Vale. The telegram you received, you're next to play the final note, was intended not as warning, but as rehearsal, a dramatist preparing his final act. Kramer turned to her, but Wolfe raised a hand. Allow me to complete the arrangement, Inspector. He reached for another sheet. Mr. Vale's guilt is confirmed by the cipher itself. The final notation, 2 bars at the bottom of Haldane's last page, spelled a word. Vale, not as signature but as destination. The money was to be redirected into an account under his control. Haldane saw this, realized his expendability, and confronted Vale. That was his last conversation. Rusk exhaled sharply. All supposition, a jury would laugh. Then, Wolfe said mildly, I recommend you test their mirth. The ledger sheets will suffice. Kramer picked one up, scanning it with the skepticism of a man who'd rather face a loaded gun than sheet music. So, this is it, the whole motive laid out like a tune. Indeed, commerce disguised as composition, murder disguised as misfortune. Daphne whispered, He told me Joey had stolen from him. He said Haldane was the liar. He said many things, Wolfe replied. Men who destroy others for self-preservation often believe their own scripts. For a moment, the room was still except for the faint hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. Then Wolfe leaned back, folded his hands, and surveyed the trio like a judge pronouncing sentence. I have communicated my findings to the district attorney. Inspector Kramer will confirm that Mr. Vale, now in custody, has signed a full confession. Your name, Miss Vale, will be publicly cleared. Daphne's breath caught. Her gloved hands twisted together, and she nodded once. I don't know how to thank you. By resuming your life, Wolfe said curtly. She rose, unsteady, and reached into her purse. A folded cheque emerged, the same one she'd written the morning she first came to us, her hand trembling. She placed it on the corner of Wolfe's desk. You earned it, Mr. Wolfe. I don't want— Pfui, Wolfe said, his voice suddenly sharp. I will not profit from misery. Your payment has been your freedom. Leave the cheque. Her eyes glistened, but she didn't argue. She turned toward me. Goodbye, Mr. Goodwin. Take care, I said, and stick to torch songs that don't burn the house down. A small, weary smile flickered on her lips before she disappeared through the door. Rusk followed, silent, a man calculating his billable defeat. Kramer stayed seated. He lit his cigar at last, puffing once before speaking. Well, Wolfe, you pulled it off, I'll give you that. I did not pull, Inspector, I observed. Yeah, he leaned back. Vale cracked in the holding cell. Said you'd figured it all out. Can't say I'm sorry. It'll make a clean press statement. He hesitated. You were right about the lipstick too. Forensics confirmed it wasn't Daphne's. You get that by intuition or black magic? Neither, Wolfe said. By reason. Intuition is merely reason in haste. Kramer grunted. You and your fancy words. He took another puff, studying Wolfe with something dangerously close to admiration. All right, I'll make sure Miss Vale's name gets cleared proper. No headlines, no leaks, you have my word. Wolfe inclined his head. Your word, Inspector, is currency more stable than most. I accept it. That earned a grunt that might have been gratitude. Kramer stood, straightened his coat, and extended his hand. Wolfe hesitated, then, miracle of miracles, took it. The handshake was brief but genuine. All right, Kramer said, moving toward the door. You'll get your copy of the statement tomorrow. Try not to embarrass me in the papers this time. Archie will restrain himself, Wolfe said. Sure, I said. From now on, I'll keep my charm holstered. Kramer almost smiled. Good night, gentlemen. When the door shut behind him, the office exhaled, as if relieved that justice had left with the cigar smoke. I went to the safe, tucked away the photostats, and leaned against the edge of Wolfe's desk. Well, boss, I said, another criminal symphony brought to a close. You realize I'll never look at sheet music again without checking it for felonies. He gave me a look somewhere between pity and indulgence. You seldom read it for harmony, Archie. That's because I'm tone-deaf to crime, not rhythm. He reached for his beer, lifted it with ceremony, and took a slow sip. The clock on the mantel ticked its steady approval. Funny thing, I said. For all the racket it caused, this case started with one bad note and ended with silence. Appropriate, Wolfe said. Music like truth is most eloquent when it stops lying. I typed up my notes while he dictated a brief summary for the file, his voice steady and measured, the words falling into place like puzzle pieces that knew their job. By the time I finished, the night had deepened outside, a velvet backdrop for Manhattan's ceaseless hum. Fritz appeared at the door. It's 9:30, sir. Shall I bring the dessert? No, Wolfe said. Coffee. Strong. Mr. Goodwin may have a ginger ale if he insists on immaturity. Make it black, I said. I'm civilized tonight. Fritz vanished with the quiet efficiency of a man who knew better than to question victory routines. When the coffee arrived, Wolfe leaned back, eyes half closed, hands resting on the arms of his chair. You did well, Archie. Well enough to earn overtime. He almost smiled. Well enough not to annoy me. That is compensation enough. High praise, I said. If you ever get sentimental, I'll call a doctor. Do, he murmured, but not before 10 a.m. The office settled into that rare stillness that comes after storms. The orchids upstairs would be sleeping, the city outside still thrumming its endless tune. Wolfe finished his coffee, set the cup down, and said softly, "The song is ended." Yeah, I said, glancing toward the dark window where the reflection of the desk lamp wavered like a ghost of the day. But the silence holds the truth. He closed his eyes again, content. I gathered my papers, switched off the typewriter, and stood there for a moment, looking at him, solid, implacable, the one fixed note in a city full of discord. Then I said, mostly to myself, Manhattan hummed outside, and Wolfe reached for his beer. My laughter hadn't quite come back yet, but give it time. Even a dead tune echoes if you listen hard enough.